or welcome to Coming to the Table, depending on whether you are a new viewer or you have watched this show before. This time, I am so happy and thrilled to have Karen Walch as a guest. And I've known Karen for, I don't even know how many years. And Karen is one of the people that I respect and truly admire within this field because Karen has been involved in negotiation, lecturing on negotiation and studying negotiation for years. So thank you, Karen, so much for taking out the time, joining us here.
Thank you.
Karen, would you share a little bit about your background?
I have a PhD in international relations and studied negotiation and diplomacy at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. And I had a chance to teach at Thunderbird School of Global Management. And I took everything I learned about diplomacy and coercive negotiation, principled negotiation, and brought that into the international management world at Thunderbird School with all my international students.
Wow. So you've really been working with a global audience as well.
Yes, I have.
That inspired me to an immediate question. That is culture and negotiation. How do you see that? I mean, we don't all negotiate the same way, do we?
We don't.
No.
We don't. And this is what I had found especially interesting because part of my studies was to find the world of political psychology. Mm-hmm. And what I learned about psychology and social psychology is that no matter what our national culture is, our organizational culture, our family culture, ethnic culture, our brains become acculturated to looking at the world in a particular way.
Interesting.
And without us knowing it or not, we all develop an unconscious attachment to, let's just use time, for example. Mm-hmm. Some of us live in a culture, whether it's national or organizational or family culture, that fluid time is important. That 2 o'clock does not mean 2 o'clock.
I know that from my wife.
Right. And I learned that the first time I moved to Honduras.
Yeah.
And I started to work in the Latin America, and I was raised very Germanic American. And I didn't know that I was raised, it was rewarded, it was expected, that to build trust and to be respectful, we were on very fixed time.
Sure.
So when I wasn't being respected with fluid time, mañana does not mean tomorrow, I went into a culture shock. And then I learned about this field of culture shock. Means that you come into a culture that doesn't reward and expect and reinforce what neurologically I had been reinforced.
Right.
So this is why cross-cultural negotiations are especially difficult.
Right. Oh, yeah. I could imagine that. Through your life and experience, Karen, do you find typically that the average professional negotiators are aware of that cultural clash that they might meet?
No, and it goes across cultures. This is part of the joy and the blessing that I've had working cross-culturally, that I used to think it was Americans, for example, who were just totally fixed on their own cultural perspective. But this is something I've seen across all cultures because it's a very human phenomenon. And most of us, you call it incompetently unaware, unconsciously incompetent. I think that a lot of us, it's not intentional, but we think we are creating trust. However, the way I might build trust with you in a fluid time culture will be very different in a fixed time culture.
Sure.
So this is where a lot of us have some trouble with negotiation.
So, again, I'm just getting inspired about this topic. How would you advise a client? How can they try and resolve that, so they don't end up having a lack of trust because we misunderstand each other? Should we verbalize it before we start negotiating, or?
I love this question because it seems counterintuitive. I think one of the beauties of working in the Thunderbird environment is that we started very early in the education, not around how to negotiate with the Chinese, for example, but where did I learn my cultural perspective? A lot of it is around how do I learn how I learned, and then how do I unlearn that preference?
Okay.
And then how can I relearn? So we look at self-awareness, becoming consciously competent, of understanding where my cultural preference comes from, and why I would default to coercive behavior with you because I'm expecting you to be a fixed time person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So bottom line, know thyself.
Right. Karen, very recently you released a new book, Quantum Negotiation. It's a great book, by the way. I read it. I really enjoyed it. Could you tell us a little bit about the content of this book?
Yes. This is the result of work that I had done over the years with a colleague, Jörg Schmitz, who is a cultural and business anthropologist. And we also met our other friend, Stefan Markdies, who is a global training leader. And they had said that they needed something in their training materials that would include some of the new sciences. So, for example, Jörg and I have been studying social neuroscience, cultural anthropology. We also were very interested in quantum physics. We were interested in the new sciences around how do we integrate these multiple levels or dimensions of our human experience. And what we're finding, and you see a lot of the work today on the fourth industrial revolution or the age of disruption, the age of exponential change and acceleration, we had discovered that with our clients and our coachees and our students, our human capacity for this kind of change and disruption needs something that addresses the human nervous system. So this book is the result of taking everything we've learned in all the sciences, and Jörg and I are very academic and intellectual. You and I would appreciate this as well. There's so much to say, but Stefan has a very, very strict focus on how do we make it practical.
Oh, great, yeah.
So he corralled us to make what we have learned in the findings scientifically into how this impacts our human behavior practically day to day. And it's built around a lot of neuroscience.
I see. Exciting.
It is.
It's one of the few books that is actually covering that aspect, isn't it? I mean, most books on negotiation is like on negotiation and not focusing so much on the areas around it.
Yeah, and this might be the result of what I call a 50-year research project I've been doing. Because when I started in negotiation, it was all about cognitive skills. And I always felt that was inadequate. Then I discovered social and emotional intelligence. So then that had to be a part of negotiation. And then I learned a lot about this whole world about mind, body, spirit, and how the physical dimensions, like a exhausted brain or a dehydrated brain, cannot be creative, cannot be innovative. So we started integrating in mind, body, spirit, and science work on physiology. Then I was so excited. I found the world of spiritual intelligence and spiritual capital. That is, underneath all of what we need, we all need to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And for some of us, it's the free market. For some of it's part of a spirit bigger than ourselves. For others, it's a grand purpose. So if we're out of alignment on all of those human dimensions, then we are not able to actually behave. And what we say, we are not able really to get what we need. Because we're not clear about what we really do need on the spiritual, emotional, social, physical, and cognitive level.
Very interesting. So what you're basically saying right now, Karen, is that the world of negotiation is so much bigger than a lot of people actually sees it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. We actually call this, meaning anytime you have something that you need and you need to work through another human being to get it, you are in a negotiation. So we're problem solving. We have a budget. And we basically have to problem solve in a relationship. We're going to go to a movie. I'm going to negotiate through you. If I'm creating something new, like writing a project like this, that's a negotiation. And sharing limited resources. So anytime you're in a case where you are negotiating for something that you need and you're working through others, you are in a negotiation.
I completely agree. Yeah, because I think it's interesting, Karen, because a lot of people I meet, when I ask them, they see negotiation as something happening at corporate level in a conference room where a contract have to be signed. That is what is defined as a negotiation. But what you're saying right now is that it's so much more.
Right, exactly.
It's happening in every household every day with the parents and the kids and the spouses and
exactly. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Karen, another question I would like to ask you is that my experience is that when I talk to some people, they think negotiation as negotiation. That's it. There's only one thing. And to me, it's kind of funny because that would be like if I want to buy a car, there will only be one car out there. But I see so many different directions within negotiation. I mean, some believe in combative behavior, some believe in what we call zero sum, I win at the expense of you, some believe in collaborations. If you should just get back into quantum negotiation, what you believe in, what direction would that take?
Our fundamental principle is if the relationship matters in order to even get an agreement or to implement the agreement or to problem solve if there is non-performance in the end, then we would focus our activity on what we would call a quantum approach. Because the relationship matters, we're going to invest in that relationship. If the relationship does not matter and it's a transaction, you will never see this person again, you have a very limited short period of time or resource, then you would use a much more hardball strategy.
Right.
Then the investment isn't in the relationship. It's more about how can I win relative to the other in that situation.
Sure.
From our experience, and I'd love to talk to you about this as well, how many social experiences do we have where the relationship does not matter?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
In terms of the reputation you build in the world.
Sure.
So a lot of quantum is around because this is all about the context of a relationship, not about self-focus, but curiosity about the nature of the relationship.
Sure.
Which means we have to know who we are first. How do I set my nervous system so then we can build trust with each other? Because the relationship will matter. In order for you to agree with me, I need to be motivating you from your own preferences.
Right.
What you need.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Very interesting.
Yeah.
One of my fields, as you might know, Karen, that has my keen interest is trust and
Right.
negotiation.
I love the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Or rather, the lack of trust, because what I found very often is that the lack of trust is a key issue among many negotiations or many organizations that are negotiating and among people. And what I find is interesting is that a lot of organizations actually don't identify or realize that this may be an issue. What's your take on the whole trust issue in relationship to negotiation?
Well, this is why I found the world of social capital so interesting, and emotional capital, and even spiritual capital. That, let's just say, one of the first things that I discovered when I was working on a neuroscience committee with the National Association of Sciences, that somebody did a study of Eastern negotiators and Western negotiators, and basically did an MRI, did some kind of and hormone testing. So what they discovered when they were observing the brains and the hormone levels in negotiators from the West, trust, the oxytocin and all of those trust hormones were going off. When if I say I'm going to do something and then I do it, you begin to trust me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that commitment and follow through.
Right.
Then what we saw on the Eastern side through these scientific studies was it's not so much saying what you do and follow through, it's how committed were you to the relationship? Despite all the contradictions, all the time delays, when you showed a commitment, and they could feel it on a neurological level, that the relationship mattered. And what was interesting to me about that is that has a lot to do with our political culture, our constitutional culture. And in the West, we have constitutional rights to protect us. When we don't have that same kind of constitution in some of the Eastern cultures, especially when we're mixing cultures, we don't yield to the law.
Right.
We yield to the relationship.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So I found that to be extremely interesting, and that's why I thought in negotiation that trust is culturally specific.
Yeah.
And you can take that down to any level. And how do we learn about what builds trust with you? How do I style shift so I meet that commitment need? And I find a lot of my students and coachees have a little trouble with that.
Oh, I could imagine that. Yeah.
Because you carry around this software and expect this to happen.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And this is where then the other part is difficult, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, based on what you said, I think that's very exciting, Karen.
It is, yeah.
That opens the door for a tremendous amount of potential traps, right? I mean,
unconscious traps. This is the most difficult.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Last year, Karen, World Economic Forum in Switzerland came out with a study where they claimed that negotiation is the fifth most important job skill, regardless what kind of job you're in.
Right.
And obviously, I live and breathe negotiation, and I was surprised that they would rank it that high, even.
Yeah.
What's your opinion about that?
Yes, and for me personally, and I'm sure this is with you too, in our personal experience working in negotiation, we know that as a fact that's becoming increasingly important. But I'm also I do a lot of reading and research on the world of disruption right now. And a lot of the consultancy agencies, for example, will do a lot of surveys. This comes up not only in the World Economic Council, but everywhere. The thing that we need most while all this technology is moving in one direction is what makes us human.
Well, okay.
So the hard skill today is what makes us human. And that's why this is asking for us, what makes us get what we need in a negotiation when we're really working with human beings.
Right. So is it almost like a counter reaction to technology?
I'm not sure if it's a counter reaction. I see it more as we're in an age of some evolution.
Okay. Right. Interesting.
And I think if you think about evolutionary biology, it's almost like all of this technology is going so fast, but what we're learning about the human brain and the human nervous system, the sciences on that are exploding right now, which you and I know the ancients have been telling this to us for years, but now it's scientific.
And now it's proven.
Right. To respect you would actually have more impact than trying to coerce you.
Exactly.
It's a neurological
fact.
Right. But now it's proven in the data.
Now, you just mentioned the word technology, which interests me a lot, because with artificial intelligence and everything that's happening around that, I actually see people, thought leaders within our field, that are saying that, it's a good thing because computers will be better negotiators than human beings. So they're looking forward to, in the next, and they even say within the next 5 or 10 years, they will have computers negotiating with computers, releasing human beings' influence and actually give us better results. That contradicts a little bit what you're saying about the whole relationship thing.
Well, what I like about that is if the data can actually capture our 5 human dimensions, not only what you need in terms of your cognitive preference, what do you need from a social, in terms of do I feel like I belong? Do I feel like I'm included? Is that part of the data of success?
Sure.
In terms of feeling, did I feel like I was treated fairly? That's another indicator of success. Did it actually limit the kind of energy and exhaustion that I had to go through to do this? And then on a spiritual level, does it really hit my level of inspiration and meaning and motivation?
Right.
If that kind of data can be captured, we might have something there.
Okay. Right.
And in fact, I just had a call this morning with someone who I'm working with who has an organization that is taping videos that we're doing in training. And they're doing all of the work on capturing nonverbals in a scientific, data-driven way.
Right.
They can actually monitor how much turn-taking takes place.
Oh, right.
Who captures most of the attention? What do you hear in the words? Are they inclusive words or are they coercive words?
Right.
All kinds of new technologies that might help us in terms of correcting our behavior or helping us capture what is success.
Exciting.
I guess my final word on that is what goes in, what are you measuring?
Sure.
And then what might come out will determine the kind of success you will have.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't you think that this is such a big part of where all of this is going?
Yeah. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Karen, I'm sure that you have met some difficult people that you needed to negotiate with. And the question I get from a lot of my clients is that, what do I do if I meet somebody who don't want to collaborate, somebody who's more combative, somebody who doesn't want to open up, somebody who's not interested in creating trust, but I still need to negotiate with that counterpart? Have you got any advice on that?
I have many stories to share, but I have one that comes to mind because it illustrates a lot of what I try to capture in the work that I do and the coaching that I do. So this involves a case where I was in a place where I was like the associate director reporting to a director. And this person was new to the organization. And he had all kinds of ideas about, this is a case around faculty. And working with faculty, you really cannot coerce faculty to do anything. You need to include them into some collaboration. But this was a project where he had wanted me, as the associate, to create a program that included all the faculty around campus to take students to different organizations and different universities around the world. And our negotiation went back and forth many, many times. And I kept reminding him and showing him the programs we already had. And you cannot make faculty develop their relationships. They already have relationships with organizations and governments and corporations. So he just insisted we need to have a meeting. So we were sitting at a table almost like this. And he was sitting there and I was sitting here and we were talking and he just insisted that I needed to get them to do this. And he was getting really angry and he started shouting at me. He wasn't smiling like you are now. He was very mad and he almost puffed up. I could see him puffing up and kind of moving close to the table doing this.
Yeah.
And my heart started to race. I'd never been treated like that in a professional setting. And my hands were just shaking. And I had a shorter chair and I put my feet on the floor and I just found myself. And then I put my hands on my legs and just kind of found myself and grounded myself.
Right.
And then I took a deep breath and I sat back. And then I said to him, this must be really frustrating for you. And his shoulders just went down.
Wow.
And then he moved back.
Right.
He said, yeah, this is extremely frustrating.
Okay.
And then I negotiated a way not to work with him ever again.
Okay.
Because it wasn't the first time. I knew he did this.
Yeah.
But he had never done it to me.
Right.
I just choose not to work with people like that.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
But for me, it was about calming my own nervous system first.
Yeah, yeah.
And to keep him from becoming, accelerating his aggression toward me.
And I fully understand and agree what you're saying, Karen. However, I think it's difficult for some people just remembering to calm down when you're meeting that hostility. Is there anything you could share on how we could be aware of that sitting in a situation like that?
I think it comes back to what we've been talking about here. And this is why we talk about quantum. That in Newtonian physics, we believe that separate atoms lived in this separate universe and we had to kind of control the other to do what we want them to do. Quantum physics tell us that we are actually all connected on a subatomic level. The reality is we are connected. We all are human. We all have something that we need. And a lot of times aggression and coercion is the result of some kind of deep need that's so almost wounded in a way that they don't know how to get what they need.
Interesting.
So this is what we call preparation means. How can we remember that we all are human? We all are connected. And I've studied narcissism a lot. And what I've learned is that in reality, there's only about 1% of the population that are clinically narcissists. That you will never be able to, they don't have the neurological function to have empathy. So you just learn how to contain that. Most people want to. They want to be treated with respect. They want to be listened to. They want to be acknowledged. To remember that as part of prep. And that's why so much of what we talk about is preparation of yourself before you go into a negotiation. Especially if their habit or their culture, their behavior might appear too coercive or aggressive. And sometimes it's just a direct way of communicating. For those of us who are indirect communicators, we are assaulted by that. And that has helped me a lot to remember I would prefer to indirectly negotiate, ask more questions, whereas I work with a lot of people who have a much more direct approach. And what I learned to do then is suspend my judgment that they're out to get me. They really don't care about me. That's not necessarily true. If I remember, we are all connected on the human level. So
that's a very good advice, Karen. Thank you.
It's hard.
Do you find, with your international experience, do you find that some cultures might be more aggressive naturally in negotiation than others?
I wouldn't say relatively more aggressive. I would say much more direct.
Right.
That's what I would say.
Right. So if you should just rank, let's say, the top 3 of cultures in the world that you would see being very direct or more direct than others.
I don't like to put them in any kind of generalization, but I would say there's a cultural approach in China, for example. Some would say in Germany.
Yeah.
Some would say in Russia that's a very direct approach. And even parts of India, I would say, would be that way as well.
Right.
Then you think about the East Coast of the U.S. Versus the West Coast of the U.S.
Yeah.
And the South.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I had a couple students in my courses, and they were going to get married. Someone from the Netherlands. The man was from the Netherlands, and the woman was from Georgia in the South, very genteel Southern. And they were talking to me about their negotiations with each other. And we realized that he loved to debate. And she just found that so offensive. and he was trying to encourage her, let's have fun as a couple to debate.
Yeah.
And she just found that incredibly offensive. And she wanted to have much more of a dialogue and get to the needs. And he thought that was a little too wishy-washy. Like, have an opinion about something. Don't ask all these questions. So they learned to style shift.
Yeah.
With each other.
Oh, really? So they're actually aware of that?
Yeah, they became aware of it because we were studying cultural perspective. They're still married. Oh, well, right, exactly. Have a baby. Right.
Well, that's
and their baby is a third culture baby.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Very interesting.
You can understand that.
I can.
Yes.
I only have a few questions left, and one of them is actually a very simple one. Are we good at it, Karen? Are we naturally good at negotiating?
Yes, I think we are.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is why it's interesting. As children, we have learned very easily. We know what we need, and they may be very biological. They are emotional needs. We know how to get them. We don't know how to express it. And we do know how to do this. We do know how to do this. As we become more educated and we become more logical, we become much more cognitive, we forget our natural, intuitive state that we all have something. We live in a social world. We need each other. And I need my relationships.
Absolutely.
And part of that is, how do I just tap into the reality that we are connected?
Right.
We tend to forget that.
What's the reason that we tend to forget that?
Well, think about our educational system.
Okay.
Think about the way we think about business and winning.
Sure.
It's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
It's a learned behavior.
So it's not a natural trait?
No.
No. Interesting.
It's natural given the context we've had to live in.
Sure.
But what's not natural now is our context is changing.
Sure.
We're having much more democratization.
Yeah.
People want to be participants. They're not really all about operational efficiency. Forecasting doesn't work the way it used to. So how are we going to get what we need is tapping more into that human nervous system in terms of what do we need as human beings.
I agree with you, Karen, but if I should challenge that for a second, if we look at the political environment in so many different countries right now, isn't that actually going quite the opposite direction?
To me, what's happening right now is not any different than any other period of time.
Right, okay.
To me, it's when I was in graduate school, the very first lesson I got is increasing globalism, increasing more cooperation or more conflict. This has been an age-old story in international relations. And this is just another period of showing the face. It's always been there.
Yeah.
And it will always be there. There's something about this period of time that's exposing it. I just see that it's part of the yin and yang of what we've always had about conflict.
Yeah, yeah.
And nationalism, protectionism versus globalism, interdependency.
Yeah.
To me, that's nothing new.
Yeah.
And we're also going to see another cycle of this.
Right,
when you look at the long cycles of history.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know you and I see it every day. How much cooperation is going on, despite what we're seeing at that political level.
I talked to Dan Shapiro, as I know you know as well, from Harvard, and he talked about tribalism.
Yes.
Where he says that tribalism is the thing.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's
and that tribalism is a neurological phenomenon.
Yeah.
that they have been acculturated to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of safety within the tribe.
Right.
But
Right.
if you think about the long cycles of history and evolution, that is part of adult development, social development, is we move from thinking about the tribe that we actually see something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think tribalism is built still on Newtonian physics. My tribe is better than your tribe, so I need to control and I need to win in this limited resource situation.
Sure.
But as you learn, you actually see that we actually fundamentally connected and actually we all need the same things.
Exciting stuff, guys. Last question, which might be a tough one. If you should end this show just with one important advice on negotiation, one single advice based on your long life experience, what would that be?
I would say to remember the common mistakes of making judgments that others are out to get you or hurt you or harm you.
Okay.
And the other is to remember the principles of improv, which after all the study, all the work I've done, I always think these 3 rules from improv, if we can remember these, is first of all, always make your partner look good. Always say yes and always come with the mind that's very curious about yourself and others.
Wonderful.
I would find that can help us get exactly what we need.
Wonderful. Karen, if our viewers want to get more information about you, what you're doing, how can they do that? Besides obviously buying your book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. My email is karen@quantumnegotiation.com. And my husband, Paul Kinzinger, and I are partners in an organization called Clairvoyant Leadership, clairvoyantleadership.com.
Okay.
And we do a lot of work on how can we be clear as an organization or as a human being to be flexible and buoyant to get what we need, to style shift, and to be able to adapt to what we need.
So what kind of help can you aid with organizations?
So a lot of what Paul does is focus on how do you get clarity as an organization around your strategy and purpose when it comes to disruption. So he does a lot of work on strategy with organizations that are facing disruption. And then my work is those who are leaders and those who are employees in an organization that's going through this kind of disruption and exponential change. What is the kind of coaching and leadership support they need so they can be clear of who they are because they are leading a collective nervous system.
Yep.
So that's the kind of work, kind of the yin and yang of what the two of us do. Clairvoyant leadership.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.